make sure we live before I start my speech, boys. If I start my speech, I gotta wait for the YouTube to come in. You're late, buddy. You're late. All right, let's see what's going on here. Come on. Start the video. I know you guys probably already see me, but I'm waiting for the YouTube part to come in. It's so delayed. Like, it's 33 seconds delayed. Wow. All right, we're good. We up. And this joint. You're late, buddy. Late. Yeah. You guys taking this kind of seriously? You're late. Your period's late. Like, calm down, all right? We're going to get ready to do an interesting topic. Jim, I'm at work. Interesting. Jim in his palatial estate. Well, it's my dad's house. Here, check him. Yeah. That's right. We in the suburb. It's gonna do some long shots for a second. A little Reformed Stoic freestyle for you. I'm just sit around in the background and wait. All these comments coming in. I pissed off some of those Neopagans the other day with my materiel. Yo, hold up. I got a phone call. Give me 2 seconds. We back. Come on. I'm drinking, man. Come on, man. Gosh. Gave up my master's degree for this video. Come on. All right, so today we're going to talk about different types of paganism. And yes, I will stand for part of this video. We're going to do a lecture. I'll sit on a bar stool. We're not in a gastro pub. This is a lecture. All right? Come on, man. We're late. Let me read 1 or 2 comments, and then we're going to go. Because everybody's mad that we're late. You know, this is literally the earliest I've ever streamed. Ever. Uh-oh. We got the UK. I'm cooked. I'm cooked, blood. All right, how many skulls has Jim cracked with that ring? I know. Actually, I did smack someone upside the head with this ring once. It's very painful. I'm drinking Nigerian foreign export Guinness because I'm hard. You're also in the UK, so it is obviously 5 o'clock somewhere. I hope. And having a live stream during a wagey hour should be anathema. No, being a wagey is anathema. I'm temporarily disemployed at the moment, which is okay. I'm doing investing and I'm making money, so I'm not doing nothing. All right, let's just begin. I don't think there's any good comments here. We just got a bit of a. I see Jim is interested in delving into different kinds of paganism in contrast with the Bible. Well, that is the title of the video. I mean, anyway, let's begin. How do you manage to upset neo-pagans? Aren't they too busy trying to present they have culture? Well, Erdun Brown, a certain neo-pagan I debated not long ago, and his whole tribe, his posse, the neo-pagan Northwestern European LARPers, the Nordic LARPers, etc., were upset because they assumed that I was a Yahud who's trying to get people to do rabbinic Judaism. And I'm, as far as I'm aware, I've actually done some of the best theology against rabbinic Judaism. So if anybody wants to accuse me of doing rabbinic Judaism and telling people to follow that, just in terms of YouTube, I think I've done some of the best content on it, right? Whether it's in live streams or in videos, you cannot be a rabbinic if you watch this channel. So right away, that does not make any sense. As you can see, these people are all obsessed with their conspiracy theories. And Nick, if you're watching, you can get out the Gene Bingo card because Plato is about to be mentioned. Being obsessed with conspiracy theories is actually Platonism, because Plato thought that the seen world is different from the unseen world that is all around us. So we're actually caught in some kind of a veil and we're missing out on the true reality. And Gnostics believed in the same thing. So you're actually falling into a trap if you think everything's a conspiracy. It's not. Sometimes things are exactly as they appear to be. And that will segue us into the topic du jour. The reason the neo-pagans are upset is because I've proven you cannot blame the Yahudim for everything. Does not mean I love rabbinism. What it means is you cannot blame the Yahudim for everything. The world is complex. They do not pull all the strings in all of society. They did not create communism. I'm sorry. Gentiles created communism, right? Based off Platonic authoritarianism. And based off the Renaissance naturalism, epileptic naturalism of the humanists following Rousseau, Jean-Jacques Rousseau. So all this stuff comes from Western European mental abstraction. It's not the Yahudim. The Kabbalah I did yesterday is not the Yahudim. They did not invent it. It's literally just Neoplatonism, but for Hebrews. That's it. You cannot say the Yahudim stopped me from getting a girlfriend because they invented Kabbalah. I do not tolerate victimhood on this channel. There will be no victimhood. They are not holding you back. They are not good. Sometimes they are involved in nefarious things. I'm not apologizing for them, but your own life is in your own hands. So let's begin with the topic of the day, finally. As you can see in my wallpaper, I have Assyrian paganism faced off against Plato in the background. Some people may be confused by that phenomenon. They may wonder, Gene, why is Plato next to some Babylon pork? Right? Yeah, again, though, that's the thing, though, Caravaggio. There's a lot of Gentiles pushing it, too. Does that mean that it's an Italian thing? Does that mean Italians rule the world? Yeah, but Christian Lacroix, Marx did not like his tribe. He said Jews were garbage. So the problem that you guys have is thinking that because someone's ethnically Jewish, they're part of some kind of a cult. But they're not. Some Jews actually don't like their own people and think their own people are like ghetto garbage. Marx was one of those people. And what's that dude? Soros is another one. You can be a Jew who doesn't like Jews. Are you telling me that's not a real concept? There are white people who hate white people. So anyway, I'm not anti-Gentile. Dude, I'm literally a Gentile. You aware of that? Like, just because I'm Semitic does not make me Jewish. I'm a Gentile. And by the way, right before we start, sorry for the long intro, you do realize that most of the pagans that the Hebrews were slaughtering in the Old Testament, up until the time of the Maccabean revolts, were Semites. All right? They killed Jordanians. They killed Arabians. Who do you think the Midianites, the Moabites, the Ammonites, the Amalekites were? The Sidonians that are attacked? Where's Sidon? Where's this Sidonian civilization? Where's Sidon? That's Sidon in southern Lebanon. The Canaanites, they're from Palestine and Lebanon. So most of the people that they're fighting are Semitic Gentiles. Okay? You are not Edom unless you're a Semitic person, first of all. So Europeans cannot be Edom. Europeans cannot be Amalek. And the Hebrews killed a lot of Semites. The Greek and Roman wars came much later. Like, do you guys not understand? Arabs are counted as Gentiles. We are not counted as Jews just because we happen to be from the same linguistic family as them. Even if we share ancestry with them, we're still Gentiles because we're not in the lineage of Isaac. You guys understand that? All right. You may wonder, based on the wallpaper, why I have Assyrian paganism and Plato. So Plato's in the background in the sky. And that's very purposeful. I've done my own Raphael with that wallpaper. This is Jean's Raphael work. And so if you look at Raphael's painting of Plato, Aristotle, Plotinus, Socrates, and all the great philosophers, some of them great and some of them great, you'll see that while Plato is pointing up, Aristotle is going like this, saying down. So Aristotle is saying we have to look at the reality we live in. We have to observe nature. We have to use induction. Plato is saying, actually, we need to ponder the heavenly cosmic things that we cannot necessarily prove. But man is more than what's down here. But Aristotle is saying, I don't care about what's up there. I care about what's here. So likewise, I've done in this wallpaper, Plato is up there. He's like up there in the... What am I doing? Up there in the corner of the video, of the wallpaper, right? And you have the Assyrian guy who's over here. And so that is showing one key difference. Many people make the mistake, which I mentioned in the Kabbalah stream yesterday, that all paganism is equal. It's not equal. It's not equal. The paganism of Plato, Socrates, Pythagoras, it starts really with Pythagoras. That paganism is a very highly developed monotheistic paganism. Pythagoras didn't believe in multiple gods. Neither did Plato, Socrates, Plotinus, Ammonius Saccas, or Aristotle. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they are kosher, okay? See, I'm using Jewish terms, haha, that means I'm a Jew. The point is, just because somebody says they believe in one God does not mean it's the correct God. And this is why I argue with Muslims a lot about this Tawheed stuff. They're obsessed with oneness. All they care about is numerics. Oh, you have one God versus the Christians have the Trinity. Okay, but there's a lot of people who have one God and it's the wrong God. Are you saying Baal Hadad from the Old Testament is good monotheism because the Canaanites only had one God? So we have to contrast this one pagan God monotheism, very developed deistic monotheism, perennial monotheism of Plato, Plotinus, etc., Aristotle, with the monotheism of the Bible and with the paganism of the Bible. All right, the paganism that is talked about in the Bible is not Plato's paganism. The Bible doesn't scarcely talks about anything of that nature. It avoids the subject entirely because that's not the pagans that the Israelites were dealing with. They were not dealing with Aristotle. They were not dealing with Plato. So when you have Aristotle, Plato, and beginning with Pythagoras, you have the idea that the universe is a codice, a symphony of numerics. So there is some kind of a great creator, and Pythagoras says in his work that God is always doing arithmetic or mathematics. He's always doing mathematics. Algebra is the sacred language of the universe. If you could take the DNA of the cosmos, it would be geometrical shapes. It would be mathematics. That is what Pythagoras says. Guess what? The Bible is completely absent of anything like that. Go read Genesis. You're not going to find mathematical computations there. So we can straight away see that Pythagoras, despite believing in one God, his God is an archon of mathematical creation. The God of the Bible is the personable, opinionated, sometimes aggressive, jealous God who created everything out of nothing, who does not explain everything he does, who does not cater to human logic, but to his own logic, who is not bound by a morality that's around him, but he binds his morality to what is around him. That is the difference between the God of Pythagoras and the God of the Bible. Now, that you understand that, whenever a Muslim says one God, one God, one God, you have to ask him, what is the one God? Great, you have one, but is the most important characteristic of our God that he is not multiple gods? Is that the most important characteristic? Or is it a combination of that and the fact that he is the God, there is no other? Not meaning there's no other numeric, but there's no other type of God. Even if someone claims to say they have the one God, they don't, unless you have the God of the Bible. So unless you have the God of the Bible, you do not have the God of the Bible. It doesn't matter if you claim you have one God. We don't want no Brahmin theology here. So that is the difference between Plato and the biblical God. And I would wager that if you are a massive fan of perennialism and you like Greek philosophy, like I also like Greek philosophy, but if you're like obsessed with it and you think it's divine truth, you're probably going to have a better time with the Quran, because the Quran mentions philosophy or describes God in a more philosophical way. it describes God in a way where it's not just using philosophy, but the vehicle through which God's existence metaphysically is explained is highly Neoplatonic. And I think most people would admit that, unless there's some kind of like, Neo-Salaphite who rejects all falsafa, all philosophy. They don't use it at all. Fine, they would reject that. But most Muslims have no problem aping the Greek philosophy. So that's the difference between how the Israelites viewed God and how the Platonists did. So with the Assyrians, the reason I put that in the wallpaper is because the paganism we're dealing with in the Old Testament is not Plato's paganism. It's important to differentiate them. So when God is critiquing the paganism of the neighbors of Israel, he's not really critiquing Platonism. When God critiques Platonism or ideas akin to Platonism, it's very, very subtle. So God will say in Deuteronomy 29:29 and in 2 Corinthians that, God says in Deuteronomy 29:29, the secret things belong to the Lord. Secret doesn't mean incomprehensible. It just means God's not going to tell us the answer. He doesn't want us to have the answer. That's what it means. Then in 2 Corinthians, you have another issue that's very similar, which is essentially, I'm going to sit now, which is essentially, the idea that you cannot go to wisdom beyond Christ. So there's Christian wisdom. There's the wisdom of Christ in the New Testament. You don't go beyond that. We do not extrapolate into what does not exist. We got a super sticker here from Guitar Tunings. Thank you so much for that $10 super sticker. So when we look at the Assyrians, all right, and the Canaanites, and the Perizzites, and the Hittites, etc., they all believed that their gods, like the Olympians, were concrete entities who did not exist outside of time, who did not exist outside of space, who did not exist apart from the created order. They were literally within the same reality as everybody else. They were just better. They were just gods. They just lived on the mountain. They lived on the cloud. That is what the god was. You could actually go to Zeus and say, Zeus, where's your divine essence, man? He'll say, what are you talking about? All right? If that moron idol could speak, he would say, what are you talking about? I have no divine essence. I am Zeus. Everything in front of you is Zeus. My flesh, my blood, that's not a form I take. I am literally this form. There is just my body. That's it. This is the whole God. There is no essence. There is no other person. There's no transcendence. There's nothing. There's just a dude on a mountain. That is Zeus. That is how the Greeks in the Olympian Grecian period thought of their gods. That is how all of the neighbors of Israel thought of their gods. The Canaanite god, he lives over on that mountain over there, right? The Ugaritic god of northwestern Syria, yeah, he's on that hill. Well, how do we worship him? We have to go to his hill because he can't hear us everywhere. We have to go to his hill. That's where he's geographically constrained and located. All right? The Assyrians are actually some of the most intelligent pagans of that paradigm. So the real paradigm here is not paganism versus monotheism. That doesn't mean anything. There's many different paganisms. There's many different monotheisms. And you can be a pagan monotheist. But the paradigm is ancient Near East versus Hellenism. Not everything Greek is Hellenism. Okay? Zeus, Poseidon, that's not Hellenism. I don't care what people say. That's not Hellenic philosophy. What that is Greek Hellenic culture. And they tried to Hellenize the Levant and Asia Minor. They were very successful at, and they were very successful at Hellenizing Syria, by the way, and Egypt. But that's not the same as what Plato did. We've already explained that. So rewind if you're just getting here. But the ancient Near East believed in these concrete deities. Now, they also believed in metaphysics. They weren't pure materialists or anything. The Assyrian Babylonian system actually invented the great chain of being. So we give Plotinus a lot of flack sometimes, but I don't believe in the single cause. I mean, I believe in the single cause fallacy. It is a fallacy. I just don't believe in doing it, obviously, because it's a fallacy. Plotinus did not invent everything. And not everything Plotinus says is garbage. And not everything Plato says is garbage. But most of you know that, so I don't have to celebrate them because people are already doing that. I'd rather critique what needs to be critiqued. And so in the Assyrio-Babylonian system, you had the great chain of being operating in that lieu of metaphysics. You also had the concept of sympathetic magic, though that is highly debatable whether that actually came from Assyrio-Babylon or whether it was something that was earlier and they just happened to adopt it. As for the Great Chain of Being, that's pretty much provable. You can read the text of Maklu, which I have, and you can find the Great Chain of Being in the text of Maklu. It's right there. That's even before the Assyrians, actually. That is pre-Assyrian, ancient Mesopotamian theology. And so these guys, even though they had these concrete deities, they did still believe in some metaphysics, but you cannot confuse them with the real hardcore Hellenism metaphysics. So that's what you have to understand when you're looking at the Bible. We're dealing with people who didn't touch transcendence and stuff like that. Those were all unique to the Greek philosophical system. You know, Pythagoras' mathematical universe has nothing to do with how the Assyrians and Babylonians thought of the universe. All right? Ammonius Saccas, who's a friend of Origen, a great pillar of the church, even though he was deeply heretical, he learns from Ammonius Saccas. And so you could say Origen is like the left hand of Neoplatonism. What they're learning has nothing to do with Assyrian paganism. And that's why it's difficult to critique Hellenistic philosophy, because if you don't understand this distinction, you go, oh, it's paganism. Someone will point out to you, no, this is very different from what the Egyptians and the Assyrians believe. You have to know these distinctions here, right? Philosophy has a place in the study of theology and religion. Where it does not have a place is replacing the cosmology of revealed scripture, and as St. Paul says in 2 Corinthians, going beyond the wisdom of Christ. So Christ says, the Greeks are wise and the Jews demand a sign. But Christ is the sign that the Jews are rejecting. And the Greeks, Christ is the wisdom. So there's not, you have Christ and then we have human wisdom on top of that, and like that's how we find God, is through epileptic fits on mountains. No. He says Christ is wisdom to the Greeks. So we don't use Aristotle to find Christ. We use Christ to understand Aristotle. Aristotle can be used, but through Christ, not the other way around. You don't grab glasses of Aristotle and then you view Christ. It's the other way around. So that's what St. Paul is saying. Now, let me take a look at some comments. Then I'll continue the lecture. This is a pretty good one so far, I'll say. Blue Skittle, thank you very much for that super sticker. Let me scroll up. Muslims got it from the Greeks. I mean, yeah, I'd say the whole religion is very Greek. Christ is the head of the church. Apollon, I don't know what you're talking about there. Please support. Okay, guys, where are the mods? You will not debate in my live chat. I don't want to debate baptism in the live chat. Today's topic is Assyrian paganism versus Hellenism. Okay. So I don't really care about these arguments. Let's see. I remember this guy, Caleb. Many of the gods were based on real human characters in history, like Nimrod after he died was taken for a god. That's true, but at the same time, they're not all, they go beyond that. Like it could have been a real guy, and then they over-exaggerate him so much that he's now not recognizable. And this is where we're going to get into George Stanley Faber in a minute, so hold on to your hats. I think some secrets from us are a good thing, like the when of Judgment Day and whether their sex will exist after the resurrection. Yeah, actually, good point, Tim. And I agree. There are certain things God doesn't really want us to know. You cannot peer into God's mind. You'll destroy yourself because you will, first of all, blaspheme by inventing things God has not revealed. You'll, second of all, go insane because, it's like Jack Nicholson says, you can't handle the truth. It's not that the truth is inexplainable and illogical. Just you can't handle it. You can't. It's over. It's over for the Kufers. I still don't get the sticker thing. What is it? It's basically a super chat, but you don't leave a note. Like you're just giving a quick donation thing. Yo, James, I'm traveling to Puerto Rico right now. Well, I wish you safety. Are you on the plane? Am I streaming into the office of the airline in this country? Do you not believe the spherical Earth is real? I've told you I'm very agnostic on that issue. I don't debate it because I have not researched it. I just like to point out that everything we believe comes from philosophy. That's it. Doesn't mean you can't believe that necessarily. It's just interesting how it comes from philosophy. All right. Work doesn't let me pay enough attention to folk. I hope some stays. Yeah, I mean, you can just watch this after. The Second Temple Judaism, I don't think it did. I don't think it infiltrated Second Temple Judaism. Maybe give me an exact period that you're talking about, because if that was the case, Christ would be appealing to Greek philosophy. But almost nothing he says has any semblance of similarity to Hellenism. I mean, people read that into Christ, but we actually read what he's saying. It's Old Testament citation, spiritual wisdom, which is a Hebrew tradition. The Greeks are not the only people who have wisdom. Citation, parable, prophecy. There's not a lot of room left over for like Plato to show up in the gospel. Yeah, I mean, there are obviously differences between the Olympian Greeks and the Assyrians and Babylonians. The Babylonians thought of themselves kind of as lesser gods. And so a lot of these pagans don't have the reverence for God that is shown in the Bible. There isn't as harsh a concept of blasphemy, really. Like, nobody really cares if you blaspheme Zeus. Thing is, you'd have to be in a town where people are Zeus worshippers. You could go to a town where they only worship Poseidon or Artemis. So it's very scattered. There's no coherent belief system. There's no priest of the whole Olympian thing. There's a Zeus priest, an Aphrodite priestess. Like, it just essentially like 20 different religions rolled into one. It's not really one coherent system. But the Assyrians kind of thought of themselves as gods. They were even more insulting. And if you look at in 2 Chronicles, Shalmaneser, I think, when he's invading Jerusalem, he declares in Hebrew that he conquered all the other gods, and that all the other gods are dirt. And then he implies that the biblical God is also not going to be able to help the Israelites because he destroyed all the other gods. So they had a very, almost like a video game concept of how the gods operated. Like, you could kill a god, you could destroy a god. That's what they thought. The gods were just really, really divine, powerful beings, but they still operated in creation. It's like killing not a normal lion, but like a fiery lion that's like 20 feet tall. It's hard, but you can do it. That's what they thought. So I can just go to where that god is and attack him. It's literally an MMORPG, okay? Whereas the Israelites said, nobody can find God. You can't even see God. God's voice sounds like thunder. It's actually so terrifying. We're going to ask Moses to go up there because we don't want the revelation. It's too scary. So Moses goes up to Mount Sinai alone. In the New Testament, the Father speaks to Christ, and everybody thinks they just heard thunder. So loud and booming and powerful, it sounds like thunder cracking through the earth. They can't even understand that it's the voice of God. Whereas in the pagan tradition, whether Greek or Assyrian, it's walking around like, hey, I spoke to Zeus. Oh, okay, cool. I'm going to go kill a Mesopotamian god, and I'm going to wear his pelt as my cloak. They just did not care. They didn't have that reverence you see in the Bible, and they didn't think their gods were all powerful, all wise, created every single thing, eternal. Many of the gods come into existence at some point. Like, the universe is eternal, but the gods come into existence. That's how it can be. All right. Got an anchor, Gene stream. Thanks. That's debatable. What they believed about the Shekinah is not the same thing that they believe today. The Pharisees, believe it or not, were not really that Hellenized. They just invented rabbinic psychobabble on top of the law of Moses. The Pharisees weren't doing that much philosophy. Neither were the Sadducees. Okay? The Pharisees were kind of like Epicureans mixed with rabbinic psychobabble. They weren't literally quoting Plato. Said before, the reason the Pharisees reject Christ has nothing to do with Greek philosophy. Where do you put the sticker? I don't know. All right, let's continue. Thanks for the response. I don't care if the earth is a Rastafarian. It has nothing to do with anything. Sorry. Seem to be Caravaggio and both seem to be examining Shoppi's goggles. Who are you talking about? Caravaggio and who? He said and both. Who's both? Unusual time for a stream. Yeah, I'm at my dad's house, so got nothing to do at the moment. Thanks for the stream. I was hoping you could recommend a few books regarding church history. Thanks. I'll put some stuff in the comment section. Nick is back. Nicholas is back. Amongst the ranks of the Pharisees and Sadducees who took prominence after the Maccabean revolt. Yeah, they came from the Maccabean revolt. They're an outlier group who have no legitimacy to be innovators of the Old Testament. That does not mean they were like bopping around quoting Aristotle. I'll have to clip the beginning rant from before. That was great. People are waiting. Yeah, please. Actually, Nick, if you clip stuff, could you just send it to me on Discord? and I'll put it as like a short or something. If it's longer than a minute, it'll be its own video. So if it's longer than a minute, do it. That'll be awesome. Huge thanks if you do that. All right, now we're going on to weird topics. Eugene, thoughts on the flat Earth Christian saying the Earth can't be found? I think you mean round, because pagans made the discovery of the Earth being round. Well, I did mention that. It's not really pagans. It's monotheistic pagans like Plato and Pythagoras who deduced that the Earth is round. Now, that doesn't mean just because Pythagoras said it, it's wrong. But I have not researched this issue. So, as you all know, all right, this is going to sound very hypocritical, but because just me saying this makes it not humble anymore. But I like to be humble. See, now I just ruined it. I like to be humble and just admit when I don't know something. So I'm not going to teach a topic I have no idea. Just have not read that much into it. Someone asked me a question about magmatic flow. How does magma enter a chamber in a volcano? I don't know. I'm not going to teach that. I don't know that garbage. Actually, geology is cool. It's not garbage. Anyway. So we have now dealt with the difference between Hellenistic monotheism, ancient paganism, ancient Near Eastern system, and the Bible. The Bible operates in a world that everyone around them is ancient Near Eastern. There's no semblance of, we got these like Hellenistic, deistic, perennial gods. It doesn't really get close to that. People will say, St. Paul believes in natural religion and perennialism because he says the Greeks' unknown God is the God of the Bible. Everybody's got the same God. Yeah, but here's the problem with that. Paul says the unknown God, which they don't worship in any specific way, which they have no canon for, which they do not really praise in any way. They just have, hey, there might be a greater God that's greater than Zeus and all this. Paul is saying, yeah, that God who you have not identified, who you have no rituals regarding this God, that God is going to be the biblical God. This God you're looking for that you haven't found yet, I'm telling you, there's only one God, and it's the creator from the Bible. That's what he's saying. He's not saying, you fashion your own religion about a one God. Guess what? We did too. It's the same God. He's not saying that. He's saying you haven't found the God yet. That's why he's the unknown God. It's right there in the text. Okay? How do you miss that, guys? He's unknown. We haven't done anything with this God yet. Paul is saying, don't do anything with it. Don't invent your own theology. I'm telling you, the unknown one God is my God. And now you will believe in this God too. And that's it. That's it. I was actually on the Crucible last night. Some dude named Jordan. Was it Jordan? Jacob? Maybe it's Jacob. He was a libertarian-esque Christian, and he tried to flip me into saying natural religion, but I disproved that. Just because God has standards that he demands the world to follow does not mean we have natural perennial theology. So God demanding pagans to do the Old Testament law of Moses, that doesn't get rid of the Old Testament tribalism, because per that very same law of Moses, you're supposed to treat people who are unbelievers in a way worse than you treat a believer. So it's not universal perennialism. It's right there in the text. All right. I think I've shown the difference between these two pagan systems enough. We talked about the great chain of being the other day. I'm now going to open the floor. Jacob Weingard, more like Vineyard. Here we go. StreamYard link. I'm going to pin it. Come in. Do not talk about nonsense. I do not want to see cult leaders. I do not want to see weirdos. I do not want to see Mormons. I want to see topics related to what we are discussing today, which is ancient Near Eastern paganism, Hellenism, the Bible, and anything adjacent to that. So it doesn't have to be directly about Babylon, but bring up something kind of similar. I don't want to hear topics like, are you watching, Myron Gaines? Myron Gaines is not a pagan god, so he's not relevant here today. All right, let's give this guy a chance. What's up?
So I have a question. Didn't paganism kind of start like with the creation of civilizations and stuff like that?
Well, not entirely. I mean, we believe per the Bible that we have creation made by God. People err away from worshiping God in a proper way, but most paganism comes after the Noahic flood. And George Stanley Faber does an excellent way of showing the similarities between these pagan myths and the biblical account, and how instead of saying, the Bible must be false and it took everything from pagans, it's actually the other way around. We have the revealed doctrine and revelation, and the pagans have taken their religion based on the events of Noah, Adam, and other. I've done a little bit of research into that topic.
Right. Yeah, because I followed a lot of your stuff, and I don't think you've ever done a response to Zeitgeist, but I always thought that kind of stuff was nonsense, and people always think it's a smart got you, and they try to compare Jesus to Mithras and all this other stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you an example right here. Okay, Origins of Pagan Idolatry makes a good case for the polytheistic religions of the world. These are just some of my notes. Descending from mythologized folk memory of the flood. The notes I made. So Noah, Shem, Ham, Japheth, all these people who actually exist are then reworked into the pagan system. So Zeus taking the role of Ham castrates his father, the Titan Kronos, the equivalent of the pre-flood Noah. I mean, these are stories that are similar, that come at a similar time, but they clearly have all the same root, right? That's why so many religions believe in a global flood, but they all believe, all of them, you can look this up, almost all the pagan religions believe that the goddess of beauty or whatever comes out of the flood waters. They all do. You can look at Aphrodite, Inanna, Ishtar, all of these. There's some kind of a watery abyss that covers the world, and a goddess of fertility or beauty will come out of that. They all have that in common. So I think Zeitgeist is kind of poor quality stuff, and it only works if you assume already that the Bible's fake. That's the only way that stuff works.
Right. Something I've learned is a lot of people that jump to those conclusions are just people that don't read that much.
Yeah, I agree with that. They don't read much, or again, they're walking into it thinking the Bible has to be fake, so the only explanation is it took from paganism. That's what they say. Yeah.
Right. Well, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for coming in. I'm looking at the comments real quick, and then we'll let other people in. Myron is my pagan Elohim. How dare you delete my existence? Well, now you're a kuffar. Why do people think Christianity itself is Hellenic paganism? Because there are some Christians who've basically many Christians who've turned the religion into Hellenic paganism. When people critique that, they're not wrong depending on what they're talking about. There are people who've done that. That's so weird. Yeah, you should. I'll do a whole thing just on that. What is the Orthodox position related to the Nephilim? They were literally sons of fallen angels and people that they take roles as god kings. I'm unfamiliar with the Orthodox position on the Nephilim. Clearly, the angels in the Bible are referred to as sons of God. So that doesn't mean they're like Christ, but they were created in time and space in some kind of a material or spiritual existence. So I'll have to go into that more and actually give you a proper answer. Suyoshi, hello, Jean. How's it going? Good to have you on here. All right. Give me 1 second. I'll add the next people. What's up? How's it going, hook-nosed? You are here. Not hearing anything from you. Okay, rejoin when you're working your mic and stuff. Yo, all heart, it's me, Suyo, my brother. What is this, a reunion? Guys, is it a reunion or something? Comment back when you can come back in. Remember, the StreamYard link is here. Okay, so we have a StreamYard link. Until more people pop in, or until that guy comes back and leaves me a comment, we'll continue. So, now that we've seen the difference between monotheistic paganism, hardcore paganism, and then even within that, the difference between like Olympian hardcore paganism and Assyro-Babylonian, you now have a better understanding of the type of religion the Israelites were dealing with. But God, as I said, does deal with overindulgences in philosophy, such as Deuteronomy 29 and 2 Corinthians. You don't go beyond what's been revealed. That's why when Christ talks, he's not inventing new stuff and saying, actually, Moses is wrong, the Old Testament's dumb, and we're going to do Greek philosophy instead. He doesn't talk like that. And so many people are surprised by those opinions. They think, well, wait a minute. The Greek Orthodox, don't you guys need philosophy? And I say, no, there's a lot of people in the Orthodox Church who understand the limits of it. And so when I say you don't need it, you can still use it, but it should not fill in a gap. If there's a gap that God has not answered, we don't need to fill it. I've noticed that's a very Catholic attitude as well. Oh, God didn't reveal something. We need to measure it. God didn't tell us how long that refrigerator is. We have to measure it theologically. And so they need an answer for everything. Oh, what happens in transubstantiation? First of all, we have to make a word called transubstantiation, right? Then we have to define how the Eucharist is not eating God's entire essence. The Orthodox, they just say, yeah, we don't know. Like, there's just the Eucharist. That's kind of it. We don't know how it happens. It's a mystery of God. Let's just not delve into it. And so I would say that makes the Orthodox less philosophical, obviously, than the Catholic Church. So that's an example of where Orthodoxy takes a step back and says, no, there's a mystery we don't totally understand. And they're comfortable with that. There are people in Orthodox history who use a very heavy-handed version of philosophy, but it's not necessarily something that you must do, nor is it something that is part of the biblical understanding. So as an Orthodox Christian, the way that you're using Platonism and stuff should not be like, oh, God revealed X and Z. He did not reveal Y. But Plato revealed Y, so we have to use Plato to find that answer. That's incorrect. That's heretical. Instead, what you can do is God revealed X and Y, or X and Z. We can never know what's in Y, but we can use philosophy to help us better understand X and Z. We cannot fill in Y. Y was not answered by God. All right? Okay, why did God make creation? Was he forced to make creation? No. Did he have to do it because it was good? I was talking to Arval on his channel about this. Okay, I had a semi-discussion, semi-debate with Arval. And he said God had to make creation because God is the all-good, and the best thing for him to do was create, and not creating, logically, is worse than creating, so he had to do it. And I just said, I don't believe in that logical supposition. I don't believe that God has to be your definition of the all-good. I don't believe God has to do anything that the all-good has to do. Nobody forced him to make creation. He decided to. Creation didn't come out of his stomach. Creation was created out of nothing. See the comments. Yeah, like apophatic method does have its place. You can't do it for everything. Hey, is adultery good or bad? Oh, it's a mystery, my son. No, we know what some stuff is. We know what some stuff is. But you can't know everything. You can't know every single thing. See. Does the OO position on my physitism the same in Christology as the Chalcedonian? If not, what are the significant differences? I mean, it has nothing to do with anything, but I'll answer it anyway. So the Oriental Orthodox, they believe that Christ is a one-nature composite. So he's not just a third kind. He's not a close encounter with a third kind. He's not one nature, which is just human or just divine. He's a divine person who has human and divine nature in one combined unified nature. Unity. That's what they believe in. So Christ does stuff according to the human nature and according to the divine. Obviously, when he eats food, that's not going into a divine essence. His stomach is going into his human being stomach. So they'll recognize those differences and they'll say, yeah, Christ ate, the one Christ, not just the human person. There is no human person, but the divine person Christ ate something, but it impacted his physical body. It's not going to impact the divine essence when he eats a fish or something, like he does after the resurrection. He has fish and honeycomb. Think that goes into the divine essence or something? No, they'll say obviously not. So that's what they believe per that. They believe in universals to an extent, but they don't believe in universal human nature. So they don't think there's like one human nature that just exists like a bubble, an orb in the world. Like, hey, there's humanity. We can just jump inside of humanity. They don't believe that. So when Christ took on human nature, they will say he didn't jump into humanity and raise us up or something like that. He divinized all human beings because he became one of us, not because he leapt into the ontology of humanity. So that's what the Orientals will say. Some Orthodox hold to the universal nature, some don't. Jonathan Hill does not, actually. Jonathan Hill believes it's heretical. And so that's a whole other can of worms. But that's a difference between the Oriental and the Chalcedonian position, which is that there are two natures after the union. So he still has a divine and a human nature after the union in the Chalcedonian position. So he's not one nature, he's two. So you have basically Nestorianism. There's two persons inside of the body Christ. Like there's a divine Christ and a human Christ, and they're different, but within the body. Then in the middle, you have Chalcedonianism, which is he does have two natures after the union, but it's united only in the divine person Christ. He's not a human person. He's a divine person. That's what they believe. And the Oriental position is actually, it's one nature, but it's a composite. All right, whatever, let's move on. Serious question for Gene. What are your thoughts on Orlov's works? He's most known. I have not read it. That's a good recommendation. This is why I like Gene's content. Very practical application of theology. We don't have to show everything and fill in gaps of knowledge with things that are mentally stimulating. Exactly. Go stimulate. Go outside and work. And then the quest for understanding God should not be a 95-year-old quest. Okay. It should not take you from the ages of 10 until 95 years old to find out who God is. It's beyond pathetic. It's beyond pathetic. That's not what the Bible says. God says in the Bible that he's made his religion simple so that Iron Age shepherds can understand it. Do you honestly think people at the time of Moses were computing philosophy? We're talking about transcendental categories and explaining insane amounts of metaphysics. You think they answered string theory and hypothetical multiverses and stuff like that? No. They thought God came down from heaven, dwelt on Mount Sinai. They were terrified of him, and they did his laws. And they knew he was the only God. That's kind of it, man. They didn't ask questions, go up to Moses, go, hey, did God tell you whether, did God tell you what he was doing before he made the world? No, he didn't. It's none of your damn business. And that's the end of the story. So yes, theology should be practical. Learning it can be a lifelong endeavor. That's fine. But you have to settle on a position at some point. You cannot be like, I'm an inquirer. And then you die at 99. You're like, I'm still inquiring. It's pathetic. And even if you do say, okay, I'm convinced I'm going to be Eastern Orthodox, I'm going to be Roman Catholic or whatever, you have to settle on that. You can learn the finer stuff, but you can't be like, oh, I have a deficient level of knowledge of God. I'm deficient. I have to keep learning. I'm 65 years old. I've been doing this for 45 years. I got to keep learning, man. I don't know enough about God. That's when you've reached a point where this is getting into chaos. Now, you can't know everything about God, but that's the whole point. You have to let go and realize you can't know everything about God, and it's okay. That's okay.
Thank you.
What's up? Goofy? Mr. Goofy Goober, you are in the chat.
Hello, boss. I got a question for you. Could you tell me the secret to whether or not Uber Eats is a corporation or no?
Oh, yeah. I think Uber Eats is a corporation, but they don't have an office. That's interesting. What should we do about that?
They don't have an office. Maybe they should get out of my car.
Maybe they should get out of your car. They should get out of your car.
Exactly. No, in all honesty, I have a question for you regarding Babylonian paganism. Why is it so fucking gay?
Interesting question, my friend. So Babylonian paganism is fake and gay because it believes in multiple gods that can be conquered by human beings that don't really exist. And if they do exist, they're constrained to only one place, and they don't have some kind of a heavenly place where they created all of creation. So basically, they're just kind of like folklore, mythological legends combined with weird chain of being spirituality. And that is the big problem.
Yeah, I got another question. Is there ever an end to the debates?
Yeah, there is. The debate should end. You should settle on a position, understand what you believe, and that's it. And by the way, guys, that extends to debating too. So just because you know what you're doing and you want to disprove people, that's fine. But if you're disproving people for like 45 years, that's a problem. Like there has to be a point where you're like, I'm satisfied with what I know. I'm happy with it, and I'm going to attract people to my belief system. I don't need to debunk everybody. I don't need to debate, and I don't need to debate 9 hours a day. That's it.
And the last question, is it better to die in sin or to flip-flop your positions every 5 months?
It's better to be a believer who dies in a state of sin, which essentially we all are, because you can't be perfect anyway. The Bible's very clear about that. Then to switch up positions and be like, well, today I'm a Roman Catholic, but next month I'm actually I'm an Nestorian Marcionite or something. And then after that, I'm a Hindu. It's good to stay in the position you have as long as you're being intellectually honest. If you think what you're doing is wrong, then you shouldn't stay in it. But you also shouldn't be unsure of everything. Oh, I don't know what my faith is, so I'm going to flip-flop 1,000 times. You don't want to do that either.
Okay, boss. Have a nice day. See you next Tuesday.
Okay, see you, man. That's actually a good friend of mine. So guys, don't think you can come on here and with a weird ass voice and a weird name. I probably will think you're a troll and kick you. I know that guy. He's a friend of mine. He's in Germany. Cool dude. I know him. So if I know you, you can goof a little bit. But you can't goof if you're some freak I've never met before. Sorry. Yeah, you guys, some of you are aware of that Uber Eats reference. So interesting. Let's not get into that. Not get into that. Hjalti Arnason says flip-flop maxing. Yeah, you don't want to be a flip-flopper. That doesn't mean never change your position. Again, if you know what you're doing is wrong, let's say you're a Baptist and you have a disease, right? There are sexual diseases like the clap. Well, if you're a Baptist, you got the Bapt. Serious condition. There's only one cure. You got to leave the Baptist faith. But if you have the Bapt and you're like, man, I've been a Baptist for like only 3 years, but I just know this is dumb. I know this is dumb. I know this is wrong. Okay, then you should leave it. Don't stay in the Baptist faith just because you're afraid of going to a different position. But if you think my position's good, I'm certain about like 90% of stuff. I may not be able to answer every question of theology. I'm not a master, but I'm pretty certain this is it. Then you should stay with that. Don't let a minor disagreement, like this weird rigorist versus Latinizer versus baptism versus chrismation things going on online orthodoxy on Twitter. Don't let that go, oh, I disagree on that, ergo, I'm now a Hindu. It's like something small should not be, you got to convert to a new religion because of that. Major things, yes. Major things, yes. But if there's one little thing you're not sure of, don't let that doubt your whole system. You will become mentally ill doing that. Your mind will explode, and you will just not even know reality. Because nothing's stable anymore if you're going to be like that. Marcus. Was Allah originally an Arabian pagan god and then Muslims later identified with the God of the Bible? I don't know. I don't really follow that theory, to be honest. Like, people bring it up. I don't know about that one. Because the Allah of the Quran actually doesn't really act that pagan. Like, he acts more like Plato's God. The Allah of the Quran acts in fact, the Allah of the Quran acts so non-ancient Near Eastern that it actually makes it wrong. So what I'm saying is, the God of the Bible understands ancient Near Eastern paganism, the Babylonians, Assyrians, Canaanites, etc., Egyptians. So he counters what they're doing with his own system. All right? So there's a great line, I think it's by Tertullian, or maybe Justin Martyr. He explains I think it's Tertullian. He says, the ancient Egyptians used to have the ram as one of their chief gods. But God decides to slaughter a lamb for Passover. It's not just because, oh, this is cool. This will be revealed thousands of years from now when it's actually Christ who's the Lamb of God. That's one part of it. But it's also to diss that ram god. Whereas when you look at Allah of the Quran, yeah, I know there's the whole story in the Islamic scripture, the hadith, the life of Muhammad, where he destroys all the idols of the Kaaba. I'm not denying that. He clearly is against paganism. So don't think I'm making that kind of an argument. But the way in which he's against paganism comes from a very purified, tangibly Hellenistic overture. So why is paganism bad? Because Allah's the one. He's beyond these mortal things. He's not an idol. He's beyond it. He can't be. It's beneath his majesty to be a God who's on earth. That's why God doesn't enter creation in the Islamic theology. That's different from the Bible, where, like I just said, God recognizes what the ancient Near Easterners are doing, and then he attacks it with his own theology because he knows what they're doing. Whereas in the Quran, does Allah say, the Babylonians and the Egyptians are sacrificing this, so we're going to sacrifice that? They're doing this kind of thing, so we're going to contrast it with imputation. No, there isn't that contrast. The Bible has imputation, okay? That's the idea that blood for blood. When Cain slays Abel, this is obviously accommodated language, but God declares in Genesis, the blood cries out to me from the ground. spilled blood. There's something missing here. There's an atonement missing. That's what God is saying. There is something missing. We don't just spill blood and that's the end of the story. You need to be purified by atonement, blood for blood. That's what the system is in the Old Testament. Very different from what Allah, again, Allah, I call God Allah. So let's just say the Islamic God. The Islamic God does not command Muhammad to say blood for blood. He does not say, if you sin, you have to do a sacrifice for me. Or, what would be more logical, Christ already did the sacrifice for us, so you don't have to. But that's not explained. Because in the Sunni system, he never dies on the cross. In the Shia Ismaili view, he could have died on the cross, but he's not the martyr sacrifice who takes on the sin of the world. He doesn't do that. So if the God of the Bible says, when you spill blood or when you sin, the punishment is death. If you don't want to die, you have to be atoned for. So if you have Christ, you are atoned for. If you are pre-Christ, you have to do the animal sacrifices. And Muslims will often say, oh, well, how come the people before Christ had a different path of salvation? Because too bad. That's my answer. Too bad. The Bible does not operate like the Quran. The prophets do not all speak in the same way. God acts in different times, in different places, to different people. What he tells Moses to do is not the same thing he tells Elijah to do. They are different human beings who live in a different situation. The law of Moses is applicable in a way in the Sinai covenant that it was not applicable in the Abrahamic or the Noahic covenant, right? It's not applicable in the same way in the new covenant that we live in. So Muslims don't understand that, yeah, things do gradually progress throughout the scripture, and the mode of salvation can change. That's perfectly in line with what's revealed. The point is, make the long story short, I don't think the God of Islam is a local pagan deity, because then I think the Arabians would be a little more aware. Ironically enough, like, them having that much falsity would make them a little closer to the truth. But they make the blunder of, it's kind of like, that midwit graph thing. Like, you have the ancient Near Easterns on one side who are like, here's how we understand the world. Then you have the midwit who's like, actually, this is the way we're going to do it via too much philosophy. Then on the other side, you have, actually, the God of the Bible does interact with how the ancient Near Easterners understood the world. Doesn't mean he says that's just the way the world is, but he understands what they're doing. The God of the Quran does not really. The sacrifice is mentioned. The temple is mentioned. But why? What do they do? Where's the atonement? And if they does believe in atonement, how are we atoned for? Don't we still have to do sacrifices? And I say, well, wait a minute. On some of these Islamic holy days, they do an animal sacrifice. Yeah, it's not blood atonement. It's not imputation or anything like that. They're doing that as like a Thanksgiving offering, saying like, glory to God, let's sacrifice an animal to him. That's it. It's not the same thing as, oh, I sinned, I should be killed. Instead, this animal is going to be killed. Transferring of that imputation. So that is the difference, okay, between the God of the Bible and the God of the Quran, based on that monotheism. That's why I tell you guys, all monotheism is not equal. Okay? All right. Okay, antiquity. What does a Hebrew folks mean? What's a Hebrew folks? In a way, everybody is a Hebrew when they follow the Bible. You're following that same faith. Okay? So you don't transform your ethnicity, but yeah, you're following the God of the Hebrews. There's nothing wrong with that. We don't believe in a detached monad who has nothing to do with the earth. We believe that God is involved with what happened in the Old Testament. Paul says there's neither Jew nor Greek. Everybody becomes grafted into this covenant, into this religion. What's your belief on the age of the earth, time of creation? I don't believe the earth is billions of years old. I don't believe creation took hundreds of millions of years. And if you're going to say, what about animals who adapt, like a bird gets a slightly longer beak? You can explain that via Lamarckian rapid speciation. You don't need macroevolution for that. And say it's impossible for him to exist. I said it counters the previous revelation. That's the main point. Yeah, the word Elohim in Hebrew just means gods very generically. So God is usually referred to as Elohim, sometimes El, God, the divine God. A non-existent God is called an Elohim. Give me a second. I'm going to get you that citation. Be back in 1 second. All right. I'm gonna stand for a bit. Stupid sciatic nerve. What's up? So, this is the Barnes and Noble copy. I think the print job's a little better. So, sorry if you bought the other one. Nah, they're both good. I just prefer this one. Table of contents. Okay. Go down to, where is it? The myth of henotheism. The myth of henotheism. I'm going to read a little. There's no scriptural evidence that other gods exist, which are misconstrued with the typical Western pastime of storytelling to fill in gaps of information. Citation: I will pass through the land of Egypt on that night, and I will strike all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and against all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgment. I am Jehovah. Now I know that Jehovah is greater than all the gods. From the very thing in which they behaved proudly, he was above them. You shall not go after other Elohim, the Elohim of the peoples who are all around you. Now therefore fear Jehovah, serve him in sincerity and truth, and put away the Elohim which your fathers served on the other side of the river in Egypt. Serve Jehovah. Citations: Exodus 12:12, Exodus 8:11, Deuteronomy 6:14, Joshua 24:14. So the word Elohim is a generic one. It says right here in Psalm 82:6, you are Elohim and you are all children of the Most High. Are those rabbis now actually gods? No, of course not. Here's how we go, and Genesis proves directly that the gods of the Bible are false, other than, of course, the one God. Genesis 31:30, and now you have surely gone because you greatly long for your father's house. Why did you steal my gods? Genesis 31:32, with whomever you find your gods, do not let him live. In the presence of our brethren, identify what I have of yours and take it with you. For Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen those gods. Laban searched about all the tent, but did not find them, meaning the gods. And Jacob said to his household, put away the foreign gods. Again, Jacob says, all the foreign gods which were in their hands and the earrings which were in their ears, Jacob hid them under the terebinth tree which was in Shechem. So a god is sometimes not called a false god. It doesn't use that language. It just says, here's a god. It even says inanimate object. So this could be a god, all right? In the book, in the Old Testament, the word Elohim is used of inanimate objects. This is a god. If I'm a pagan, this is my god. And if somebody takes this god away from me, I won't say a representation of my god has been taken. I'll say, no. This cup is actually my Elohim. Like, my Elohim is inside of this cup. I'm drinking my Elohim right now. That's what the pagans will say. So that's what it means, okay? These fake gods are called gods, but the context says they do not exist. Again, in 2 Chronicles, the Assyrian king says, I'm going to get rid of you guys. Jehovah won't save you. And then the text says, for he acted as if the God of the Israelites was like the other gods, aka non-existent. Sup, Tim Tap?
What's going on, Gene?
Not too much.
Doing?
I'm doing good.
Hey, that's what's up. I'm part of the topic about paganism and the desire to know things. I'm wondering what your thoughts on how much of this is in the differences I found. How much is it like the pagan worship is influenced by simply like symbolic belief rather than reality? And to clarify what I mean, sure you've heard of the Morai, like Sister's Fate, that kind of like it's absorbed into Greek mythology, but there was like, forget their names, like a tribe started with an M, but it's like in the area they were conquered by the Greeks, and that kind of got shifted in. So they're the seamstresses, they cut the threads and whatnot.
Yeah.
But their symbolic nature was more like fatalism personified, more or less. And the thing I was wondering, because you're saying obviously like the desire to, it's like curiosity is one thing, but the phrase knowledge is power. So like if I understand something, I'm less afraid of it in theory. But the idea is like there is a control though. And if say those ideas of knowledge get personified into Aphrodite or if they get personified, then it's like, then in a way you can kind of control that, because then whether or not one believes in it means it can't exist. And so I'm wondering, like, whereas like with like the Christian faith, it's less, it's more like, this is reality. It's not a, like, it's like, that's why like there's like the stress of do not make graven images. Like, don't, you can't draw me, you can't sculpt me. It's like, it's, so I'm wondering if it's like the desire to know, it is like, if there's like, if it's, it feels like there's desires for control is tied into like, you know, it's personified beliefs. And it feels like that's what a lot of, like, you know, fertility goddesses, gods of war, goddess of wisdom, Artemis, things of that nature. They're still tied under, I believe Caravaggio was mentioning it, or the few people mentioning in the chat, that it's like, you can choose, you can basically control the gods, essentially. Yeah, you saw much between Greek and Babylonian attitudes towards their paganism. And I'm wondering if that is that part of what propels them to come back, because it's like they're the gods a person can control.
First, let me answer one quick thing. Guys, I didn't ban him. I put him in timeout. Antiquity is Resurgent. He sent me his video on Twitter. I haven't seen it yet. Let me answer that stuff real quick. The very same chapter of Jeremiah 31 says, my covenant will pass to the Gentiles. The Gentiles are not Judah and Israel. I'm sorry. And if you look even at modern atheist scholarship, they will admit that when Paul is telling people to do Jewish things, there's a difference between being a Jew and Jewish. Jewish meant you're becoming like the Jews and that you're following their God, but you don't actually change your ethnicity. Like Abraham was not a Jew. Adam was not a Jew. Noah was not. None of these people were Jews. In fact, the word Jew doesn't even make sense until the founding of Judea. So you couldn't even call Moses a Jew because the word didn't exist yet. He was just somebody who spoke Proto-Hebrew and met with God. And he's of the lineage of Jacob, yes. But he's not a Jew. That word doesn't exist until later. You know, so that's another thing. Remember, there are kings and rulers of the Holy Land that are not ethnic Jews. Herod was half Arab. Okay? There are a lot of Gentiles involved, and many Gentiles who weren't part of the original covenant can convert into it and do the Sinai contract. So when Paul is implying that people become like the Jews, he's not saying you have to be one of the sons of Israel. He actually directly says not everybody who is a son of Israel can claim, or not everybody who is of Israel is Israel. So just because you're from the blood does not mean you actually are one of the followers. And Paul is running around converting Greeks and Romans. So if the New Testament didn't exist, you may, you know, be able to try to argue some stuff from the old. But again, Gentiles convert, so that kind of throws a wrench in that. But in the new, it's pretty clear you have to convert all the nations. All of them. Anyway, so Tim, to respond to what you were saying, and I'll do a video response to that stuff later. Here's the thing. It's a little too extreme to say that, and maybe this isn't what you're implying, all these guys, like the top at least or whatever, knew that their gods are fake and they were using it for control. I think that happens later. Around the time that Pythagoras and Plato start to teach their philosophy, that's when the Greeks lost faith in their gods. So it wasn't just, actually, I have the citation here. Let me just pull it up for you. It wasn't just like, oh, we've always thought like this. There used to be a time when they took these stuff very literally and seriously, but then they broke out of that. Let me go to page 173 of my book, if anybody's curious. So this is where we start with, I give a whole kind of thing about the ancient Greeks and stuff. So yeah, the ancient Grecians, they believed in, obviously, their literal gods, but then you have what's called the pre-Socratics, and you have people such as Thales, who's one of the first rationalists, and he and other people like him, Thales and other people in that school, like Democritus and all these other guys, Parmenides, are the reason, Democritus, Leucippus, and others, Heraclitus, etc., Parmenides, are the ones who move the Greeks out of that because they find it like, hey, this is kind of dumb. The philosophers have some good points. I don't believe in Zeus on a mountain anymore. I believe in this ultra-transcendent monad thing that Plato's talking about. So they went from archaic, like Iron Age paganism, into now total philosophy. That's how it went for the Greeks. For the Egyptians and others, well, the Egyptians got very Hellenized as well, but they did both. So the Egyptians are kind of weird. Like, people by the coast would be very Hellenized, but people in the rural areas still kept their gods and all of that. So to answer your question, yeah, there is an element where they don't think the gods are these all-powerful things that they have to obey. In fact, many of the Greeks thought a god getting involved in your life was usually a bad thing. Like, they just want to be left alone. And the Assyrians were a lot more violent. They thought, I'm going to worship this god so he can give me a boon. Give me like a buff, a blessing. And if he's not going to give me a buff or a blessing, I don't really care about him. There's no, we have to worship God because he's the God and he made us. They didn't think like that. I hope that's a good answer for your question.
Oh yeah, no, I was definitely like a broad stroke thing I was curious about, because like there's a lot of, like, obviously you said philosophy, and obviously there are some who were pretty real about it, but it was definitely something I was curious about, because I even think I think it's in part because, like, when I think of modern people and like some that are into Wicca or things like that, it's the matter of belief is more of less about how real it is and more of, does it align with what I feel, therefore I will believe.
Yeah, and I want to give you a good definition for that. I asked Mr. what is his name, Jacob or whatever, last night on the Crucible. I did a call-in. I said to him, and I didn't have time to get to my point because we kept going back and then more callers had to come in. I asked him, do you believe in the God of Plato or the God of the Bible? He said the God of the Bible. And we kept going on stuff. And what I was going to ask him if I had more time was, if you don't believe in Plato's God, why are you trying to bind God to what feels good in your morality instead of just accepting what he says? And so that's the big difference that you were talking about. Like, it's not just about Wiccans. There are a lot of Christians who act like that. Like, God has to be moral according to me, not I have to be moral according to God. Like that old paradox, did God do something because it's good, or is it good because God did it? I would take the second position. It's good because he did it, not because he was forced to do it because it's good. That's what I think. I think the Bible is clear about that.
It's there's definitely, like, yeah, it's weird confusion, because it's similar to that. There's the question of, oh well, person A will say, well, what if God opened the skies right now and says, oh, based on the idea that people only follow it because they want the reward of getting to heaven, and say, well, what if God comes down and says, oh well, you're not going to get into heaven doing this, right? Or doing good deeds won't get you to heaven. Would you still believe? And it's like a total false question, because it's like, one, it's a mischaracterization, and then secondly, it's like it doesn't answer the matter. It's a sleight of hand where it's like, oh, would you still believe? It's just like, well, one, that's a big matzo ball they just dropped down, because it's like, even if Plato's God cracked open the sky, it's just like a person A believing it doesn't matter, because literally,
right,
that doesn't change the reality of the affair. It's just like,
and Plato's God can't crack the sky because he can't get involved in the created order anyway. Zing. But
yeah, yeah, that's just something I'm not sure how to deal. It's like you're saying, it's like, okay, you don't like, what the God of the Bible is doing. Well, like, what are you gonna do about it?
I mean,
like,
it sounds kind of like mean and kind of like people. Oh, it sounds so Calvinist. I mean, there's certain things in Calvinism that are not like Calvinism. You know what I mean? Like, there's certain things Calvinists believe that actually our traditions believe too. Like, this is not just something Calvinists made up out of nowhere. So that's really kind of the thing. We won't delve too much into that, but essentially, to sum all of it up, any atheist who's like, well, I think God is immoral. Well, you just suppose that he has to be bound to your morality. Like, we're already, before the debate has begun, you're thinking you're right. You haven't proven you're right. And that's where most of these arguments come from.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, but that's pretty much what I got. So I definitely appreciate you giving the perspective on the matter.
Yeah, thanks very much for calling in. I'm actually going to end the stream in a minute. So thank you, guys. This was a very educative one. And it was cool. Do this at Old Suburb House. Let me read a couple comments and we're done. Again, anybody wants to claim anything, I time outed the other guy, not because I don't like what he's talking about. I don't care if people disagree with me. But I do not tolerate, well, I don't tolerate anymore, debates in my live chat. So whether you're that Wesley cult leader, Mormon weirdo, or you're this Baptist guy who was complaining about baptism like an hour ago when the stream started, we don't debate in my live chat. There will be no debating. If you want to debate, you can come up here and you can talk. Or you can go in private chat, ask me a DM question, and I can get back to you another time. Or you can ask on video. But we're not just going to show up in a comment section and be like, hey, I know you're talking about something totally unrelated, but you have to also debunk me at the same time. This is not a la carte apologetics, okay? Can't order an order of fries on the side. If the burger is the menu, the burger is the menu. Islam is built upon blank. I don't know why people debate them. Well, it's a large religion. But we can't just say, oh, it's dumb. I don't care. Like, a lot of people don't think it's dumb. That guy contradicts his own theological foundation. What guy? Yeah, they were a specific ethnic group, but they were not Jews. That word Jew did not exist. So you can't say Moses was a Jew. He wasn't. He was an ancient Hebrew from the Egyptian community. He would not be able to relate with King David, who ruled a kingdom in the Promised Land and was not a, desert wandering Bedouin nomad who used to be in servitude in Egypt. These are different eras of their time. So really the Jewish era begins with the founding of the Holy Land, all right? The building of Israelite Jerusalem and the kings thereof. So that's really when the Jewish identity comes into play at the earliest. My point is, you can't say everybody who follows the Bible has to be ethnically Jewish. Otherwise, Abraham cannot follow the Bible, and Adam and all the others can't either. Right? Adam did not speak Hebrew in the Garden of Eden. We don't know what language they spoke. It's accommodated. When Moses writes the Torah, he's writing in Hebrew. He's just going to say Adam said X, God said Y, that's it. But we don't know. We don't know what language they spoke. Certainly wasn't Sri Lankan, if you know what I'm talking about. All right. I don't know about the stickers, Moldy. I don't know why you guys keep asking about that. I don't know what happens to them. Jacob said he disagreed with Calvin later. So what, is he a Calvinist or not? Like, there's no way you're a libertarian Calvinist. There's no way. All right, the stream is over.